Hello everybody, this is Rudra Pradhan here and welcome you all to this lecture. Today we will start our fourth lecture of this series and that too introduction to business analytics. This is the course contents. So, we are still in the week 1, that to introduction to business analytics and that to fourth lecture of this series, and let me start with the lecture highlights today. And we are going to discuss the concept called as a decision models. Since this subject name is called as a business analytics for management decision, so we should know actually the concept called as decision models. On the basis of decision models, we are in a position to take some kind of management decisions. So accordingly, so today's discussion will be knowing decision models, then second one is classification of decision models, some examples relating to decision models, then some of the real life examples and structure of decision models. So, first of all, what is actually the models? So, we are living in a real life scenario and the problem, the environment is very complex and very difficult to analyze, and with the help of models we can actually simplify the particular structures and we may be in a position to solve some of the management decision problems, or we are in a position to take some decision which may be very effective and attractive. So, first of all, what is exactly the concept model? It is an abstract of a real systems or idea or an object. So, that means we like to summarize the particular structure into a fact, right. For examples, let us say supply creates on demand, okay, or supply is a function of price, or in other words supply can be decided on the basis of price factors, or demand can be decided on the basis of price factors. So, the simple strategy will be like this: other things remaining constant, price and quantity supply can be positively related to each other. So, this is a kind of statement. So, now if you like to actually transfer into model format, then simply you can write quantity supply is equal to function of price, right. So, this is how you can simply write, and this is a kind of implicit format, and if you like to put in a explicit format, then it can be alpha plus beta p. So, now if you will put beta greater than equal to 0, then the entire models can be recognized as the kind of law of supply, where the structure is other things remaining constant, price decides the quantity supply, other things remain constant means again we are just putting a p. There may be some other factors here which can also affect the quantity supply, but since we are not actually taking care of other factors, then quantity supply can be influenced by p. And instead of saying actually long statement, if you simply actually put a equation that is in transfer with in a particular mathematical format, then by default you can interpret the same message. So, this is how the beauty of the understanding of concept called as models. So, the definition says that it is simply an abstract of a real life system, or some kind of object or some kind of facts. So, like the example which I have cited, the other way you can also mention that other things remaining constant, quantity, demand and price are inversely related to each other. The same particular model can be developed, where the coefficient slope coefficient can be created, you can put like less than equal to 0. So, that itself will give you the signal of this particular definitions, right. So, what should be the actually nature of the models? It should be very simple, and it should be very ideal, and can represent the reality, or it can give some kind of better inference and a better facts based kind of measures. So, capture the most important features. Model can represent important features, or can represent the kind of important facts. Can be a written, or it can be a verbal descriptions, or it can be a visual display, or it can be a mathematical formula, or it can be a spreadsheet presentations. Like this is actually cited example is I have highlighted here. So, this is simply mathematical formula, but it will visualize something the reality. Okay. So, instead of saying big statement, we are putting a particular equation, and that equation itself will interpret the particular concept which you like to transfer or which you like to communicate. So, that is how the beauty of this kind of decision modeling process. So, now so we, in order to go better understanding about the models. So, I will give you some kind of structures. So, the structure starts with classification of decision models. So, we have actually we have here classification like model can be divided into two parts. It can be a symbolic model, and it can be also non-symbolic models, right. Symbolic models incorporates numbers and algebraic symbols to represent important aspects of the problem, and it may be sometimes called as equation form. But generally when we call as a models, most of the occasions the understanding is that it is the kind of symbolic representations. Okay. So, this because this will be this sometimes beauty of this particular modeling environment. And so one particular models we call as mathematical model, and another particular model is called as statistical models. So, here in this kind of decision making process, we will be dealing with some kind of mathematical model, and that is why we first understand what is the mathematical model concept altogether. So, mathematical model in general a critical part of any quantitative approach to a decision making process. It learns with the computational power inherent in calculators and computers. So, in other way you can represent like this: mathematical models does not have to be exact, it just has to be close enough to provide better results, better inference, and that can be obtained by simply kind of common sense. This we know which we have derived from the definitions from the Simon. So, generally a model can be divided into two types: deterministic models and stochastic models. The difference between the two depends upon the probability, the connection of probability. So, the deterministic models usually called as non-probabilistic decision models, and stochastic models are called as probabilistic decision models. But by the way, so these are all called as decision models. So, technically, so all the decision models can be either actually deterministic type or stochastic types. So, deterministic types is easy to handle, but stochastic type it is not actually easy to handle, because some kind of risk and uncertainty will be attached with this non-stochastic kind of modeling environment. So, so we have to deal with understanding about these two models, and then we will go in depth kind of examples. Okay. So, since I have already mentioned actually the cluster of decision models, that is deterministic versus stochastics. So, we have actually plenty of examples. So, in the deterministic models, the examples are LPP, that is the linear programming problem models, that two primary structures, then the counterpart is the duality structure, then we have a transportation problems, we have assignment problems, we have integer programming, network optimization model, nonlinear programming, then goal programming, and multi-criteria decision making models. On the other side, under the stochastic kind of modeling environment, we have a decision theory, Markov analysis, waiting line models, simulation, and forecastings, right. So, these are two different cluster altogether. Of course, as per our requirement of this particular subject, we will touch a couple of such models, right, as per the particular business problem and particular business applications. Let me give some kind of real life examples here. So, the examples actually, see, the fact is that sometimes it is a two-way process altogether, and we may actually develop a particular model and then we like to test where it can be applied, but sometimes the counterpart is also true, where we have actually informations, and on the basis of information you can develop a particular models. That means, technically, since we have already mentioned, model is nothing but some kind of abstract of the reality, and that means technically what I can say that there is a simple equation which can actually be treated as a particular model, and that equation itself will gives lots of message or interpretation as per the business requirement, and using the particular equation you can get some kind of management decisions, or you can you can get better inference to to predict certain kind of business requirement. But the thing is that you must have a data, and with the help of data you can plot and then get some kind of trend, and by using some kind of tools, analytic tools, then the data can be converted into a particular models, may be simple particular equation, through which that equation can be helpful for analyzing the reality, or the position through which you can take a management decisions. The cited example is here. So, it is the kind of sales forecastings, and that too with respect to time. Sometimes what we have already discussed earlier, that we have a structure called as predictive analytics. So, the use of predictive analytics or any kind of predictive analytic tools. So, you need actually the kind of past data. So, once you have the past data, using the past data you can find out a trend, or checking the kind of past data, you can build a particular functional form. For a simple example, you just plot it like this. This is actually S type curve. Let us see here. This classic example is just we have a sales data, and that too weekly basis. So, the sales data can be also day wise, can be also month wise, can be also annually, but actually here as per the requirement. So, we have actually weekly data, and then the once you plot all these then you will find the actual trend, and on the basis of this trend, so you can actually fix a particular functional form, right. So, there are there are many different ways actually you can detect the particular functionality. So, regression is one of the such techniques through which the information can be, means data can be transferred into a particular mathematical equation, and that equation can be useful for any kind of further prediction or any kind of decision making process. So, that means what I can say that so with the availability of data or the kind of structures, you can prepare actually models. That is what we call as decision models. Once you prepare a particular decision model, with the help of decision models, you can predict the future, and then you can take you can go for some kind of management decision. But actually it is not so easy to develop a particular model until unless you have a clarity on theoretical part, that means the understanding of this problem and the kind of availability of data. If the information is not readily available, or the theory is not so good, or your understanding is not clear, then the exact structure of the model cannot be quantified properly, or it cannot be prepared properly. So, once you prepared actually the decision models as per the particular problem structure and the data structure, then you are in a position to take a decision, and then you are in a position to predict as per the business requirement. So, decision model decision model is a model used to understand, analyze, and it can facilitate to take a decision making that you are supposed to actually take a decision. That is what we call as actually management decision. So, what will you do that you develop a models, and that model itself will create some kind of insights or inference, and then on the basis of that insight and inference you are supposed to take some kind of decisions. So, basically so here the so we are in a discussion about the decision model. So, there are two items in the decision models, one is called as inputs, another is called as actually output, right. So, usually it is the game between input and output. So, when we are actually like previously we have write actually a supply equation or demand equations like simply q s equal to function of p like this, then here. So, this is a kind of input process, and this can be called as output process, but how they are actually a linkage. So, that we will discuss actually in the later stage. This is input and this is output. So, now it is the game between input and output. So, the types of models, so far as input is concerned, so data, uncontrolled variables and the decision variables, right. So, that means some are control and some are not control. So, still you are in a process to prepare the model, design the model, build the model, and take the decision accordingly. Technically, so when you are building a model, definitely you have some kind of flexibility or some kind of control, and you may not have some some kind of control, but always you try to prepare a models in such a way that maximum control may be in your hand, so that the prediction can be good, or the decision you can make in a proper way. So, so the other side, the types of model is output based, and that to check the performance measure and behavioral measures. That is like this is the classic example. This is actually output side and this is the input side. It is a simple kind of examples, but there are lots of complex models depending upon the situation, depending upon the particular problem, depending upon the variables involvement, depending upon the constants, depending upon the objective functions, the kind of conflicts, so many things will be there. So, on the basis of that we have to take a decisions, right. So, the typical structure is like this. So, what we have mentioned earlier, that in the decision models we have two parts, one is called as input side, another is called as output sides, and generally if you link like this, then it is the game between dependent variables and independent variables, and then output is nothing but called as dependent variables, which can predict or measure the performance and the behavior kind of things. And then the input side is called as technically called as independent variables, which may be data, then the variables may be control, non controls, and some kind of decision variables. And then finally, we have actually the decision making models. So, the model itself will connect the inputs and give some kind of message to the output. For example, let us see here. So, this is a actually typical example, simple example, and here it is the kind of profit analysis. So, the profit is the difference between revenue and cost, and revenue cost both are depends upon the price and quantity structure, and we have a kind of break even models. So, break even models is like this, total revenue equal to total cost, but we will check here actually whether it is a break even or actually something more than that or something less than that. So, here there this is actually value of productions. Let us say x is a kind of production unit, and a total production quantity is say 18 numbers, and it is actually processed through some kind of inputs, that is actually labor inputs, and in this particular case we are fixing with respect to labor only. Then one is the labor input, then there is a quantity, that is the product, and then inputs and then outputs, and then connect with actually the pricing. So, you will finally have some kind of clear cut business decisions. So, that means, so when you now what is actually the business model altogether here. So, now the business is actually you are going to produce a particular product, that is nothing but called as x, and you are going to produce actually x in 8 numbers, and then that too keeping having keeping the mind that you will be having profit per unit actually $10, and the input sides. So, you are you are able to pay $5 $5 per labors, and then labor availability is 40. So, accordingly the modeling structure will be like this: maximize x subject to the labor constraints, and then the inequal some kind of restriction. For instance, restriction is here that your actually output cannot be a kind of negative. That is why we are putting actually x greater than equal to 0. So, as a result the model output will be profit. So, the profit actually fixed actually 10, and that to the way you are linking 5 5 units, and then the particular structure about the particular structure about the product, then finally your profit outcome will be 40, and then times use will be 40. So, that means, so if you are fixing actually 5 into 8, and that is actually maximum use actually availability of 40 labors, then the business will produce actually $40 profit. So, this is how simple kind of understanding so far as a management decision is concerned, and decision models are concerned. The some of the examples, like let us say sales promotion models in the grocery kind of industry, managers are typically need to know how best to use pricing, coupons, and advertising strategy to influence sales. Using business analytics, a grocer can develop a model that predicts sales using price, coupon, and advertising. So, it is actually a simple kind of structure through which actually model can give you some kind of prediction. For instance, so let me give you a hint actually here. So, usually actually in a real life scenario, so profit is the prime objective of profit is the prime objective of any kind of business, business. Okay. So, so here, so profit depends upon two things. So, this total revenue and total cost, and total revenue typically depends upon price and quantity, right. So, that is actually total revenue is you assume that it is kind of sales revenue. So, now let us say cost is constant, and you are in a position to or you are in a position to highlight that how profit can be optimized here or profit can be maximized here. Then with the help of price and quantity decision. For instance, previously we have discussed a concept called as quantity usually depends upon price. So, that means price is the input and quantity is the actually output. So, that means any change of price will affect your quantity. So, then price into quantity will give you total revenue. For instance, the game between total revenue and total cost will be like this. So, TR equal to TC, TR less than TC, and TR greater than TC. So, here, so this is called as break even profit, and this is called as loss situation, and this is called as profit situations. So, now you have to take a management you have to go for some kind of management decision when you are here, but when you are actually here typically. So, here total revenue is less than equal to total cost. So, typically how you can transfer this particular loss making unit to profit making unit. The idea is that so how the decision model can help you lot to go for some kind of management decision. For instance, here q equal to function of p. So, that means, if I am fixing a model like this, then how the decision variables can influence your profit structure or business structures. So, that means, it typically depends upon what is the business environment you are following. So, so whether total revenue typically depends upon price into quantity. So, that means here technically Q is not in your control, P is your control. So, now any change of P, then Q will change. So, now, so if you like to change the P in order to get more total revenue, in order to get again more profit. So, you have a two different policy altogether, either you go for price increase policy or price decrease policy. So, now, so whether you like to go for price increase policy or you have to go for price decrease policy. So, now it depends upon actually a particular situation. So, now with the help of with the help of actually with the help of particularly a kind of information. So, you should actually take a decision whether you will go for price increasing policy or price decreasing policy. It cannot be a arbitrary kind of choice. So, now you plot these kind of informations and then you build a model. The model itself will give you signal whether you like to follow the increasing price policy to get more revenue and that will give you more profit, or you can go for price decrease policy that can also increase revenue, and then that will take you to again more profit. So, ultimately in this particular game, this is called as actually market models altogether in a kind of business environment. This is completely a market model, and here whether to go for price increase kind of situation or price decrease kind of situation, ultimately it depends upon few things. Your pricing few things means it is typically actually the kind of elasticity concept. Depending upon elastic change situation, then you have to take a decision. So, there is a concept in this business environment with respect to this pricing called as price elasticity. The price elasticity can be a more or price elasticity can be less. So, that means typically it will be look like this. So, let us take two examples here. You can when you will plot like this, then this will be quantity and this will be price, and this will be quantity and this will be price. So, I will give you two different environment here. This will be like this and this will be like this. So, this is called as actually ED less ones, and this will be ED a greater one. This is called as a more elasticity and this is called as a less elastic. So, here you have a different kind of price effect or price structure, and here you have a different kind of price structures. See, any change of price can change the quantity, but if you look this particular structures, let us say this is the original price. Now, any decrease of price will have a large change of quantity. So, now here it is the original price, and any change of small price will not largely affected the kind of quantity. So, now in this case, in this particular situations, if you will actually increase the price, then your quantity structure will not change drastically. So, as a result, in this kind of environment, so you have to go for increased price policy, but in this case if you decrease little bit price, then you have a large change of quantity. So, that means in this case your price strategy should be lowering the price in order to have a more revenue, more profit, and in this case in order to have a more revenue and more profit, you have to go for price increase policy. But ultimately it depends upon whether you are this environment or this environment. So, you cannot have arbitrary choice. Again, with the available data, you just plot it, model it, then you check the nature of this particular relationship between P and Q. Ultimately, in the spreadsheet you have a P information and Q information. With the help of P and Q information, you build a model or you find out the functional form. Then the functional form will give you the kind of kind of an understanding, or it will give you a kind of strategy through which you have to take a decisions. But until unless you have the kind of data or informations, you are not in a position to prepare the model, and then you are not in a position to take a good decision as per the particular requirement. Okay. So, now similarly, so there are plenty of such examples. So, okay, so these are so what I have mentioned that you have actually all kinds of information. With the help of information, you can build a model, and then model by default will summarize something or predict something as per your management requirement. Okay, so there is another kind of situations through which decision models can predict certain kind of environment. So, the previous example which I have cited is nothing but actually price and quantity relationship, and this is a kind of model where you are going to take some kind of action on costing, right. In a business kind of requirement, so cost is one of the factor which can actually affect your business process drastically. So, usually cost can be divided into fixed cost and variable cost, but ultimately your strategy should be how best you can minimize your cost structure, whether it is the fixed cost or variable cost. So, again there you cannot arbitrarily actually apply any kind of strategy. Again similarly, similar to the previous case, you have actually cost informations, then you plot all these cost informations, build a model, then find out a particular mathematical kind of equations or mathematical model through which you can get some kind of inference, or you can get some kind of strategy so that cost can be minimized properly. So, that means technically you must prepare a decision model through which you have to take a decision, and you cannot in a position to prepare a decision model or build a decision model until unless you have actually kind of data or information. Once you have a data and information, on the basis of that you have to build a model, and once you build a model, so that model will give you some kind of inference as per your business requirement. Okay, so this is little bit extension about this previous model. So, you cannot understand reality. So, the variable cost can be again with respect to unit variable cost and quantity produced. So, then exactly you can actually follow up, but the whole idea is that how best you can actually minimize the cost particular structure. Okay, this is another kind of decision model. So, typically break even analysis, which I have already highlighted. So, with respect to total revenue and total cost, how best you can actually fix a kind of optimum situation. So, that means actually sometimes your revenue will be not there, but with respect to cost situation or cost availability, you can also prepare a model in such a way that this itself will give you signal how to reach the break even and how to reach the profit. Okay. So, later on we will discuss with a particular examples, and we will connect with some kind of management decision models. This is another kind of examples which we have already highlighted. Okay. So, by the way, decision models can be divided into two parts, linear one and non-linear one. But by the way, whether it is a linear one and non-linear one, so it is not in your control. So, with the help of data, you transfer into models, and first you plot all these things, all these data, and then you can get to know the exact functional form. And once you get a exact functional form, on the basis of that you have to estimate the model with a kind of predictive techniques, and then you with the help of predictive techniques you will get the parameters value. Once you know the parameter values, your model is ready. So, now that model can be used for some kind of management decision, and then and that can be actually as per your business requirement, right. So, decision models particularly actually what I have mentioned, actually sometimes some models are deterministic type, and some models are kind of stochastic kind of stochastic kind nature. So, the difference usually with respect to risk and uncertainty in some of the management problems. So, risk and uncertainty are always in the doorsteps, and you cannot just skip actually. So, while not doing all these kind of analysis and in the process of decision making, you have to take care all these factors before you proceed for any kind of prediction and management decisions. Usually decision models couple of things are very important. So, we are actually, once you find out a models on the basis of data, so you try to actually optimize it as per the requirement. That means, we like to know actually the optimum values of the decision variables through which you can actually optimize your business structure, whether it is with respect to profit or whether with respect to revenue or with respect to cost. So, it is altogether depends upon structure of objective functions and constraints, right. So, that means technically, so you have to build the with respect to the data availability, you build a model, and that model can be optimized to know the values of the decision variables through which you have to take a particular actions or decisions, and then you can optimize your business process. So, here actually you have to means this is actually the kind of structure called as a prescriptive analytics. So, it is actually connected from the predictive analytics, because the predictive analytics will give you the transformation of data into the models. Then once you get the models, so you find out the possible constraints behind this particular model. Then you like to now optimize the particular model subject to availability of constraints and its dynamics. Then that itself will give you the values of the decision variables, where you can go for optimum decisions, and that is what the actual fact so far as predictive analytics is concerned and prescriptive analytics is concerned. And some of the other similar kind of models like this, and you can go through all these details. Okay. So, the okay, so this is a similar kind of problems, and what I like to actually highlight here, that in any kind of business related problems, so it is actually a two step process altogether. So, if you start with availability of data and the kind of problem. So, by using all these data, first you prepare a model. So, that means the movement is or the step is like that the pool of the basket of data will give you some kind of model structure, and that model need to be optimized properly as per your requirement. So, now which particular tools you have to apply to get a particular decision model. So, that is actually a very kind of complex process. So, it is not so easy to just just you have to transfer, because you have to go through lots of check, cross checks, and reliability check, validity check, and then the requirements, significance kind of requirements, or kind of outputs. Then on the basis of that, you have to again streamline the process, and then finally once the model is ready, the decision model is ready, then ultimately you have to optimize, then accordingly you will get the values of the decision variables, and then accordingly you have to take a management decision as per the requirement. And how you have to operate all these things, we will discuss in detail in the later stage. With this, we will stop here. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.